welcome to On the House movie reviews and podcasts, where we talk about films, TV shows, and video games because, hey, whatever we want to cover is on the house. Joining me, as always, is Dave,
Hello there.
Lynette,
Hello.
and Kiki.
Hey.
Well, folks, it's Kiki's pick this week, so she chose the film Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland, which may take the prize for the longest title that we have currently for an episode of this show.
That's definitely what I was going for.
So,
Well,
Kiki,
everybody just shortens the title to Little Nemo anyway. It's one of those.
yeah.
Yeah.
But anyways, Kiki, you want to just kind of go over how you discovered this and what your history is with it?
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure who bought it. It's a film that my sister and I see. It came out in '89, which is when I was born. Um, I'm the grandma of the group. Hi. Um, and it's a movie that was at my grandparents' house that we would watch in the basement all the time, even though it scared the crap out of us as kids.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Those were the best kind of movies, though.
oh yeah. Um, and last time I watched it was about 18 years ago. So, um, it's just a nostalgic childhood movie that we grew up with, and I found that it was on the internet, and I wanted us all to enjoy this great film.
That sounds like pretty much what we do on this show, so perfect choice. Hmm. Well, let's just get everyone's general thoughts on it. Kiki, let's start with you.
I have an undying love for this movie, for the artistry of it, and just that it has like a homey feel to it for me because of my history with it. Um, and I would never not watch it if I had the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm probably going to be the spoil sport of this podcast because I thought it was just all right. Since I didn't grow up with this one, like I don't really have that much of an attachment to it, and it was very beautifully animated, but the characters were very hit or miss for me.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of agree with Dave. I thought it was, mediocre. It wasn't a bad kids movie, but it was just kind of, I don't know, a little by the numbers. Although it was visually very appealing at times, but there just really wasn't a whole lot that personally resonated with me or struck me as like, wow, that's great or something like that.
And as for me, I enjoyed the film quite a bit. It's may not be something that I'll want to rewatch all the time now that I'm an adult, but this is definitely the type of film that I would introduce my niece and nephew to. It's a very much a kind of has a dream like quality to it, which fits given what the subject matter is. But because of that, it also has like that dream-like logic, which may or may not work for some people. For me personally, it worked. So yeah, that's my overall opinion on it.
And then I want to add, like, going on what you said, I think growing up watching it as kids, like, it very much drills into you. There are consequences for your actions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it definitely hammered home that moral, which is a good moral.
Yeah. Heck, I
And
know some
maybe that's
adults
the
who
movie.
need to hear that.
Oh yeah,
I will say though, what going back to what Clancy said about dream logic, the thing that struck me, at least for me, is that the film isn't that weird. Like for something that's running on dream logic, it's not really that strange.
Yeah, I didn't think it. I really didn't see a whole lot of even dream logic. It seemed like pretty standard fantasy world, dark fantasy world. Like, it didn't seem. I like there was obviously the parts where he sort of wakes up, but he's still travels back into the dream. Like that was the only like dream logic sort of stuff that we saw.
I think that partially of why it is such, I guess, a linear kind of dream, and that was because he had just watched the parade happen with the circus in town, so his mind was focused on that, and so it was more of like a lucid dreaming.
Yeah, for sure. And by what I mean by dream logic, you know how in dreams stuff happens because it feels like it needs to happen for your dream to progress? That's what it felt like for me, you know?
Yep, because it is a dream. So,
I will
and I love the
also. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I love the fact that because of him being a kid, they made it seem so real, like it would be as a child, where
Mhm.
everything comes into his room and is participating in it, and
Yeah, for sure. Well, part of the reason, and we'll get into why this film kind of flows the way it does, is this film was actually one of the films that was stuck in the infamous production hell for years upon years. This film, let's see, you said it came out in 89,
89.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well, this actually began production in 77.
Ouch,
Yeah.
that's a big ouch.
So it's actually based on a American comic series, like one of the original Weekly Adventures things.
Like it's over 100 years old now. I
Yeah.
think.
And I'm not talking about like comic book like Superman. I'm talking about the old newspapers where
Yeah,
they worked very differently than newspaper comics work today, where today it's very much a gag a week, sorry, a gag a day sort of strips. But in the 1900s, 1920, basically up till the 50s, they were very much more oriented around ongoing serial stories that just never ended. They just kept going and going and going.
yeah, because their forms of entertainment were way more limited than today's.
Hmm.
They didn't have really access to it.
But when you start looking at the names of people who were either approached to work on this or did work on this at some point, whether their stuff made the final cut or not, it's a who's list of all times great. We're talking about George Lucas, Chuck Jones, the founders of Studio Ghibli.
And
Yes.
if I may add to that, I think Miyazaki said that his time when he was attached to this project was the, and I quote, worst experience of his career.
Well, that's part of being in production hell, and I'll kind of get on why they both left the project in a bit. But Brad Bird worked on this. Jerry Reese, who did The Brave Little Toaster, worked on this. Other people who worked on this is you had Frank and Ollie of the nine old men who did basically revolutionize the animation process. They were Walt Disney's go-to guys. One of them was the head animator for Snow White and Snow White. And the other one did the character animation for Jiminy Cricket. These are like the veterans of the veterans.
And one name that I definitely don't want to leave off is Ray Bradbury, who wrote one of my all-time favorite books, Fahrenheit 451.
Oh, right. Forgot about that.
Yeah.
So you can definitely see there were amazing people. And oh, by the way, the studio that did do this, little company that did a film called Akira. And after this, unfortunately, the film bombed, but they went on to do the animation for Batman the Animated Series, Animaniacs, and countless other shows that you definitely know from your childhood.
I mean, you can definitely tell that there's a lot of great animation chops behind this film. The animation is the highlight of it.
Oh, for
But if I had to guess, I'd say the pacing was probably the result of that production hell. Like the climax and the resolution both occur in like the last half hour of the movie.
It's very true.
Which is like most of the movie is spent just exploring the dreamlands and you just and it's really gorgeous, and it's very colorful and bright and full of interesting, creatures and people and stuff, and all of that's very cool. But then it's like, but they just spend so much time on that, and it's not like I know a whole lot about filmmaking or any of that stuff, but I just thought it really struck me as like, that's not when a climax usually happens, is when the movie's almost over. And that's what I thought was so odd, is like, the climax is finally happening, and I moved the mouse, and I was like, the movie's almost over. What exactly are they even gonna do in Nightmare Land? And Nightmare Land lasted like 10 minutes, and I was like, okay then. Like, it was just
And there's like an entire group of side characters that don't even get added to the story till the last half hour.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
I will say I
yeah.
absolutely love the animation on them though.
Mhm.
Oh, that was pretty great. Yeah, those creatures.
And I think the climax of the movie at the end of it also lends it to being more dreamlike, because I don't know about you guys, but when I reach the end of my dream, it's like a very big ending, and I wake up and I'm like, oh gosh, okay.
Mhm.
Like, so I
Yeah.
don't know if that's what they're going for, but I
Okay,
correlated
that does
that.
make sense, because oftentimes, yeah, like you wake up at around the climax of a dream, so that kind of makes
Yeah.
sense.
So originally, because this film was in production for so many years, I did a little bit of homework on this, in case you guys can't tell.
It's the curtains of anime.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So they had so many people working on this. Like originally, they approached George Lucas, and he sat down with them for a little while, but didn't get too involved just because he didn't think that the character of Nemo really had a character arc. And then they also sat down with Chuck Jones of, well, Looney Tune fame. If you're familiar with animation, a lot of the names we said are like the dream team of animation. And he just worked with it for a tiny bit, but couldn't get into it and left fairly early on. Then they brought in the two guys who formed Studio Ghibli, and they both quit for different reasons.
And also, like, I recall reading that even though it was finished in '89, it didn't actually come over to the States till '92.
Yeah,
And like the video game
Yeah, it usually takes a while.
adaptation got released first, which probably confused some people.
I don't know. That's kind of like Goonies 2 is a video game, but there's no movie.
I wonder if you might know which one of the animators was responsible for the Shoggoth-like creature, like the first appearance of the Nightmare Land emissary or king or whatever. He looks like kind of like a Shoggoth or something, and I thought that was actually really cool. So I wonder if I thought that was the highlight of the movie. Honestly, the animation on that, how it was this sort of formless, incomprehensible glob of eyes, and I really liked that. I wonder if maybe you might be able to know, like, I wonder if anybody ever mentioned like which of the animators was responsible for that.
It's hard to say because it was such a hodgepodge. I know Miyazaki. This was before they had started their own studio. This was like when they were just working for the T- TMS Entertainment, which is the name of the studio that actually brought this all together. And he ended up leaving because he didn't like how the entire thing was just a dream at the end. If you know him, he thinks that's a total cop out,
Yeah.
which
And it is.
it is normally, but I kind of feel like when
That's
you
the whole premise of the
It's
movie.
only a cop out if it's not immediately apparent to the audience in the first place. Like if
Yeah.
you're going into
yeah
a movie that says Adventures in Slumberland, you know it's gonna be a dream in the end. That's the whole point. But it's like it's
Exactly.
totally different if it's like, ooh, this is something that's really happening to the character, and then all of a sudden it turns out it was a potato dreaming of all this up, and it's like, okay, that was stupid.
If this was a dream a potato was having, that would actually be a good twist.
Yeah, the
yeah take that
potato must
exception.
have
We
a
just came
very
up with
vivid
a better movie.
imagination.
Oh.
Then Takahata left because, like George Lucas, he didn't think the character of Nemo really developed at all, which I can kind of see the argument there. He learns a little bit, but a lot of him is kind of still the same as he is at the start. So, anyways, they went on to make films like Grave of Fireflies, My Neighbor.
Totoro.
Yeah. Uh, films nobody has ever heard of or watched or regard as classics.
Speaking of horribly, heart wrenchingly sad movies, I was actually really concerned when I saw Ray Bradbury on the screen because I was like, oh no, I hate that guy. And I
Oh,
immediately thought back to the last movie you picked, which was a super sad movie. And I was like, oh no, it's going to be another sad one, isn't it? Ray Bradbury's involved.
Don't you be
So
bad,
I
man.
was
Ray
pleasantly
Bradbury.
surprised that it wasn't a horribly sad movie.
a literary legend.
But I will say, like, the one big issue I had with this movie that I I can't help that I can't allow myself to overlook, and I want to say in advance, like, I don't blame the actor because he was just a kid, but for a good part of this movie, I could not stand Nemo.
Oh, really? He didn't seem all that terribly insufferable.
Yeah, as far as kids go.
Yeah.
It was just the constant yippee, like just
Okay, yeah, I could see how that could be annoying. Keep in mind, my nephew watched Caillou like nonstop for like
Oh
years,
no.
so my bar
Our-
on what kids have to be in animation is pretty low. As far as they aren't Caillou, it's not gonna bug me.
and I mean, like, I know this guy has done other things even when he was a kid. Like he was Littlefoot in the original Land Before Time, but just I guess I just blame how the role was written.
Mhm. Which there's a funny story on that. So about this was around 85 or so. Both Brad Bird and Jerry Reese were working on the film, and they were kind of said when asked about what their process was, and they were like, "Oh, we don't know. We're kind of just putting animation to the words that the lead writer at the time was coming up with." And then then that same person went to interview the lead writer, and he's like, "Oh, I don't know. I pretty much wait for the pictures to come back that those guys are drawing and put words to them."
Oh Lord.
And they both quit very soon after that.
Imagine why. Jeez. Yeah, that sounds like just complete hell, like you're saying.
But it wasn't soon after that that kind of everything was brought together. They got Frank and Ollie and also Paul Julian, who that's Frank and Ollie, like I said, absolutely icons of the animation genre. They were two of the last nine old men from basically the early Disney age, and the other one, and Paul Julian's a Looney Tune legend. So, that under their guidance, the film started to find its way, and essentially what they had to do is they had about 9 hours of an animated movie and had to figure out a way to get that down to an hour and a half film because it was viewed at the time. That's the max that anyone will want to watch.
Cause I was thinking about all these big names that have been a part of it, and one of them being Chris Columbus, who took take part in the screenplay writing. Like this movie definitely could have been so much more. Yeah, he did Home Alone, Mrs. Doubtfire, Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
And he also did I think it was Emma, one of the Jane Austen movies.
Adventures in Babysitting. He's a well-known name for a reason.
Yeah, like this movie definitely could have been so much more.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of who was involved in every aspect of it.
Yeah.
Did anybody notice the stark difference between the creativity in the Dreamlands versus the Nightmare Lands? Because the Nightmare Land seems super basic compared to the Dreamlands design.
Well, part of that's
Yeah.
probably because we spent so little time in the Nightmare Land.
Mhm.
Yeah, but even for what was there, it was like standard, oh, creepy trees and moss. And
Swamp goblins.
well, and there was like, yeah, there was like two creatures that one could reasonably call distinct, and the others were like, like there was, um, the two distinct creatures were those goblins that cobble together, and that was pretty cool. And then there was like that giant manta ray that swims through the air. That was kind of cool. But the other ones were pretty basic, like sort of like deep ones or night gaunts or something like that. Um, basic shapes.
Yeah, they definitely didn't spend too much time creating the Nightmare Land. That's
And I was really
unfortunate.
bummed that the Nightmare King didn't look like the Shogoth thing that they showed at first, because that was so much more cool than his final form.
Yeah, that would definitely make more sense as his final form.
Mm-hmm. I will say this is the second film in a row that Kiki picked that has an evil manta ray.
I'm sorry.
Starting to see a pattern develop
I
here.
love oceans.
I will say I really like the opening nightmare with the train.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was intense.
I think maybe the good parts is where all the excellent names were part of, and then everything that fell through was just like that was when they're like, yeah, screw it, let's just get this done. Like, eh.
I mean, I don't
And
think it's a bad movie, don't get me wrong.
No.
I quite enjoy it, but it's a decent good movie. But with the names attached, you would expect, holy cow, this must be a masterpiece, you know?
and I'll say probably my favorite character was who I'll call Anime Rocky.
I'm sorry, wait, what? I missed
Mhm.
something here.
Yeah, who's Anime Rocky?
The squirrel. Chipmunk girl.
Oh,
Oh, I
Rocky
didn't even make
people.
that connection. Oh my word, they're nothing alike. Come on. If anything, I actually, what you know what I instantly thought of when I thought of the flying squirrel character, his name I can't remember. I thought of the naked mole rat from Kim Possible. That's who I thought was most similar to. I didn't even think of
Icarus.
Rocky from Rocky and Bullwinkle.
I
Icarus, yeah,
just
that's it.
think the headgear was similar, but
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. But it's just like, in terms of his character and the role he plays, he's so much more like the naked mole rat from Kim Possible, whose name I
That
also
is a
don't
good comparison.
some nerd
Oh,
is gonna drag
and
me.
I mean, you can tell this is like an older animated film where one of the main characters is just smoking nonstop.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
Yeah,
he
'cause
has
he's
like
the bad
5.
character, and like at the end, they're like, "No more cigars ever." So I mean, I think that was part of the whole, like, it wasn't like it was a normal thing for in that world. It was more like ooh, this guy is skeezy. Let's give him a cigar. That'll make him look extra skeezy, so you know he's skeezy.
yeah.
Yeah. Which
He's green.
I will say
Yeah, and he's green.
which I think his character is probably the best example of maybe translation or different visions for him, depending on who was in charge. Because I'm willing to
Yeah.
bet in the comics he probably started out as a villain, and then over time, or not a villain, but an antagonist of some type, and then became a good guy. So, because there's times where he's flat out, you should open this deep, dark door that says open, and then other times he's just kind of begrudgingly helping them. It's kind of inconsistent throughout the show, you know?
Well, I mean, I
And I
kind of
felt like
figured
everyone.
that his character was just he's a mischief maker, but he doesn't actually mean for like any harm to come to people. He just doesn't really pay attention to the consequences of his actions, which was why he's sort of the other side of the coin for the main character, is because the whole lesson is pay attention to the consequences of your actions. And here's this character who just does things because it's fun and doesn't give a damn about the consequences. And that's why, he needs to be there for that lesson, because he is what the main character would potentially become if he hadn't gone through that character arc.
That's true.
And I felt like everyone was way too forgiving of the crap that he pulled.
Do you mean the boy, or you mean what's his name? Skiff or something?
Flip.
Flip.
Yeah, Flip. No, like everyone.
I was
Flip
dead
is
wrong. I knew it was something with an I, and it had one syllable.
I know
Well,
Flip was messed up.
remember
Like
names at
people
all.
should have just like
Who are you guys
should
again?
have like executed
Everybody
him.
needs to reintroduce themselves.
Yeah, no, they went way too easy on him for what he pulled.
I mean, ultimately, the boy is the one who unlocked the door. And
Yeah,
Flip didn't promise
pressure.
anything to anybody, which isn't to say he didn't do anything wrong. He absolutely did. But, it just seems like, the boy was right to say that, look, this is my fault and I should accept responsibility for that.
Yeah.
Because he was the one responsible. He made the promise. He broke it. He knew the consequences of his actions, and he did it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas Flip was just like, ooh, a big door. Let's open it. That sounds cool. And it's just like, he's like the embodiment of, ooh, shiny.
Well,
Okay.
that whole scene played out very much as an Adam and Eve situation of, don't do this one thing.
Yeah.
One thing.
Yeah, it was a little on the nose how just like he hands him the key and is like, "Don't do this," and he's like, "I promise I won't." And it's like, yeah, he's
5 minutes later.
Like then you already know what's gonna happen. It just takes us a half an hour to get there from that point, and it's like, okay, eventually we're gonna get to the part where he does the thing, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, I'll say this. I know why they forgave Flip so quick. It's because he's voiced by Mickey Rooney, and you can't hate Mickey Rooney.
who's Mickey
That's
Rooney?
true.
Well, maybe in Breakfast and Tiffany's, that's just uncomfortable to watch now. But normally you can't.
Oh yeah, I remember that one.
And it was a box office bomb, by the way. I don't know if you guys saw that.
Yeah,
It didn't even make halfway.
I actually read that this is why the studio didn't do any movies after this, which it's kind of disheartening because they did Akira, man.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't seem like that bad of a movie that it would bomb. It seems like a decent enough movie that enough people would have been like, "Oh yeah, I'll bring my kid to see it in the theater." Like I don't know.
I think
Well, I wonder how wide of a release it got. Like,
also just the time frame when it came out. Japanese animation in America was just not that well advertised at the time, you know?
and I know they wanted this movie to be sort of a showcase for American audiences of what the Japanese studios could do, but
I don't think I would have even noticed that it was by a Japanese studio if you guys hadn't mentioned it. Because I mean, okay, so like the last movie you picked, The Little Mermaid, it was kind of obvious because you could see some of the anime influences in like the eyes and some of the shapes of the characters and all that.
Yeah.
But with this movie, I don't know, man. The animation looked really Western to me, and so I wouldn't have even noticed. I don't think.
I mean, it's based in America, and they were it was a co-production between U.S. and between Japan's Japanese studios and American studios. So I think the goal was to have a wide release. But I think part of the reason it probably bombed is they started this in the 70s and it came out almost in the 90s, 89.
Yeah.
Well, by then I'm willing to get I have the feeling like most people who remembered Little Nemo were pretty much not at the point of wanting to go see movies or not a big enough audience at the time to really have an impact.
That would make a lot more sense, yeah.
I thought you were about to say the audience for Little Nemo was dead, but
Well, not quite, but they were getting up there. So, is there any other particular scenes that anyone wants to talk about before we move on to the next topic?
I wish they had done more on their adventuring around Slumberland.
Mm-hmm.
Really? They went around a lot of Slumberland. The first out, or like the first, I don't know, there's like a 45-minute section of Slumberland. In
Well,
an hour
like,
and a half movie.
I mean, like, maybe not like his schooling, but when they were just like being kids and wandering around, you know, because the animation in that was stellar, I thought.
I guess, but like I feel like they did so much of that and they pushed the climax and resolution all the way to the very end. I don't know. I feel like
Yeah.
that um
But, oh, maybe because they did so much, they did so good on. I just wanted to see more, but they didn't spend a lot of time.
well,
there.
see, now if they had done a little bit better on animating the Nightmare Land parts and a
Yes,
little bit more creative, then maybe we would be wishing that the climax occurred earlier.
exactly. They definitely dropped the ball there. So it may, yeah, maybe they should have done more with Nightmare for sure.
one thing I'll say that none of us have brought up is that this is technically a musical, but like the songs just. I completely forgot like there had even been songs like the day after I watched
There
it.
are like 2 songs. This was really considered a musical?
I mean, if you're gonna
That's-
have like one song, like
I will say though, I kind of enjoyed the songs that were there. I mean, it's by the Sherman Brothers.
Oh yeah.
Those guys could basically fart on the page, and I'd be like, you know what? This is pretty good.
Yeah.
Granted, it's not their Mary Poppins level of work, but I still found it enjoyable.
well, I think actually
Yeah, I
one of
think
the
consider it
songs.
as a musical.
I actually think I read that one of the songs was like a repurposed one that was cut from Mary Poppins.
Oh, really?
I think it was like the etiquette song or however that went.
Okay.
Oh, I forgot about the etiquette song entirely. I was trying to think of what were the other songs besides the
Yeah.
2. And oh, the etiquette song. You know, and that makes me think like because there was like now I can only think of maybe 3 songs that were in the movie, but all of them took place within the first half hour. So
Yeah,
they just gave up on it being a musical after a while. Just decided it's not a musical anymore and no one noticed.
which would lend itself to it being a developmental hell
Yeah.
or a production hell. There was a musical of it in 1908, though. So,
No,
I
that's
guess-
going way back.
How
yeah,
could it be a musical in 1908? Like, you mean a stage musical, or you
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Oh, okay. I was like, there wasn't sound in 1908. There was barely film in 1908. What are you
Oh, no.
talking about?
I was going to say something. It was important,
I'm sorry.
and I don't remember what that is now.
Your mind just drifted off of Slumberland.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yes.
Well,
Was it
we were on
regarding-
the subject of what scenes we wanted to talk about before
Yes.
we moved on.
Ah, yes. Don't remember now.
Then it probably wasn't important.
It's never important when I'm talking about it.
Oh,
Yes, folks, that's considered a self-burn.
Those are rare.
self-deprecating humor.
So, we pretty much covered all we wanted to up to this point. I mean, this is normally the section we have for spoilers, but
There's nothing to
are there
spoil.
spoilers?
There's not much to spoil. The moral is pretty obvious within the first half hour. And, I mean, we've talked about how disappointing the final form of the Nightmare King is. But other than that, is there really that much to say?
I didn't hate the final form. Could it have been more? Yeah, but I didn't hate it.
It's just so basic. It's like a giant gargoyle.
I like gargoyles.
Gargoyles are alright, but they kind of fall short when you're talking about a big bad, especially when you introduce the guy as this Shogoth thing that was so cool. Everything was a letdown after that, because I was like, okay, so that was my setup for like picturing, ooh, Nightmare Land is gonna be some sort of Lovecraftian horror spectacle thing, and I was like looking at the Dreamlands like, ooh, this is like almost Dr. Seuss, and I'm like, ooh, now I'm really excited for how the Nightmare Land's gonna look, and it was so basic, and so I kind of got mad about that because it's like, really, you got me all excited with the Shogoth, and then you let me down with gargoyles.
Well, I think part of the reason why I liked it more than you did is knowing that that's classic Disney animators basically doing another take on Chernbog,
What?
and it's from Fantasia. That's the name of the demon,
Oh,
and
you're talking
that
about the
is
one that's to the tune of Night on Bald Mountain?
yes,
Ah,
and
gotcha.
that sequence is and always will be amazing to me. So anything that reminds me of it instantly gets extra points in my brain.
Yeah, it was definitely felt like that.
Well, with that being said, it's time for everybody's favorite, or maybe least favorite segment. What would we do in a remake? Lynette, let's start with you.
Well, I pretty much already gave away what my changes would have been, which is I think it would have been cool to see a more Dr. Seussian look for the Dreamlands. That way it wasn't strictly circus inspired, but a little bit more on the wacky sort of side, just to give it more of a dream logic aspect to it. And then, like I said, the Shogoth like setup for the dream for the nightmare lands, like I really wish they'd leaned into that and made it more of like a Lovecraftian horror scape. So that's, and also, I mean, I guess if we're gonna go with a little bit more on the scary side, we'd probably want to make the main character like maybe a preteen or something instead of like a 10-year-old boy. But I think those are the changes I would make. Make the boy a little bit older, like on the cusp of not even caring about dreams anymore, and then he just gets thrown into this and sort of learns how to see wonder again. I guess like add a little bit more dimension than just the basic like single moral of consequences have actions sort of thing. And yeah.
Okay. Dave?
Going off what she said, I'd say make it weirder, like especially considering this is an '80s production. It's surprisingly normal. That's what I
Yeah.
said earlier. And I would say maybe like what you said too, age the characters up. Like maybe make Nemo like the age of the kids in it. But and if they were going for like this, like a somewhat of a circus thing, maybe they continue that in the nightmares and heck go for creepy clowns. I mean, you already got Flip, but
I mean, we had Ray
That'd be
Bradbury
really
here
creepy.
and
and did
also
something
just
wicked.
Yeah.
if nothing else from the remake, drop the fucking yippies.
Did he really say yippee that much? I don't even remember
He did.
him saying that.
He did.
Kiki, how about you?
I don't have too much that I would change because of my attachment to the movie, but I do agree that they could have spent a lot more creative time with Nightmare Land and making it more of a nightmare other than just something that's dark and spooky.
As for me, honestly, I don't think there was too much the story did wrong. It was just so fast paced
Mm-hmm.
that nothing had enough time to really sink in. So I think my big change would be make it 2 movies.
Yeah.
Make the
Seems
first
a bit
part
long.
in Dream. Say again?
That seems a bit long. Wouldn't 2 hours be enough?
Well, either I'm more thinking at the time period where animated movies were 80 minutes, if that.
Well, this
Rare,
was 90.
huh?
This was 90 minutes.
Well, give or take a couple minutes either direction, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Are we remaking this in the context of the decade, or are we
Oh
remaking
no,
this in the context of the past?
it's however you want to take it.
Ah,
But what I would do is make the first film based strictly in Dreamland, and then maybe like end with like the door cracking open a little bit, and then part two's them going to the Nightmare Land, taking on the Nightmare King or whatever his name was.
Yeah.
I just think that would allow for a little bit more character, like we were talking about, and also just better explore some of the ideas in both places.
Yeah, because we know they're all capable of doing amazing things.
Hmm.
That entire production team.
Yeah, for sure.
you you
They
know what
definitely
else
could
would
have.
have been cool? At one point, they like instead of saying Nightmare King or Nightmare, ruler or emissary or anything like that. At one point, they point at the creature and say the Nightmare, and I thought for sure it was gonna take like some semblance of a form of a horse head or something, and that would have been so cool, such a cool visual pun. But no, they didn't do that either.
I would have been
Yes,
fine if
please
they
put like some semblance of like a really scary war horse or something in like the shape of like that would have been like a cool visual pun, I think.
I mean, if they were gonna just call it the Nightmare, I would have been fine if they just made him into the River Bottom Nightmare Band.
What?
Clancy gets it.
I'm doing a Google.
You knew what I was referring to, right, Clancy?
Yeah, I'll let you explain it to them.
After the recording.
Uh, sorry. Uh, anyway. Sorry, let me focus back on.
No, you're good. You're good.
I'm crying.
I'm sure we'd be losing our shit too if we knew what it was about.
So let's move on to final thoughts real quick, and then we'll wrap this thing up. So, Annette, why don't you go first on final, or Dave, you go first on final thoughts.
Well, for me, this was. Let that go first.
Oh no.
We've lost this
What?
podcast.
They got the giggles.
All right. Well, like I said, I was pleasantly surprised that it was a Ray Bradbury inspiration that wasn't super sad, so that was good. But other than that, it wasn't, all that particularly engaging of a movie. It's not bad, but it's just it could have been better. I would have liked to see a little bit more creativity, maybe a little better pacing. Should I just keep bullshitting until Dave
No,
stops
no,
laughing?
no.
I was like, maybe they muted themselves to have a laugh sesh.
A little bit, not gonna lie, but anyways, Dave, you want to go next?
Well, it was okay. Like, the animation was solid. The characterization was the biggest issue I had, and maybe I'll watch it again. But I can understand that if somebody grew up with this, they'd really like it. Like, I'm sure if the child me saw this, he would really like it, and not the adult me. But because
Yeah, there's some things you just missed the right timing on. I totally get that. And I'll go next so that we can wrap up with Kiki. As for me, I enjoyed the film. I mean, is it absolutely amazing? No, but do I definitely have some enjoyment and would recommend it to anyone with little kids? Yeah, I would. And Kiki String.
Um, I totally had this all in my brain, and it just poof.
River Bottom Nightmare Band. I hope you will start calling these moments.
Okay, I'm sure we'll get it eventually. So let's see. My final thoughts. Having grown up with it, I really do love this movie, and I would recommend it to anyone to at least watch once. Because you never know, you could love it, you could just hate it. But having been so long since I watched it and watching it recently, it is a lot different than I remember, and I still love it. It's just definitely not the same as I remember. I don't know how it scared me as a kid, but it did. Because even like you said, the nightmare was not much.
I still think that train sequence was pretty intimidating, though.
I wish
That might
I'd
have been the
a motif of that throughout the movie.
Hmm?
I wish that would have been like a recurring motif throughout the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that was huge. And as a kid, I was totally oblivious to names and who's who and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, after discussing this and looking at the team they had, like, man, they considering the team they had, they definitely dropped the ball in a great way because they could have made the most mind blowing cartoon ever. But I love it.
Well, normally, if you got all these big names, like I have to wonder how many of them were asked to to work on it simultaneously. Because normally, like putting all these big names together with different styles is almost asking for disaster.
That is true.
I mean, I know there wasn't any overlap between the Studio Ghibli guys and Brad Bird. They came in afterwards, like a couple years, but still, it's too many cooks in the kitchen. But folks, that wraps it up for this podcast. As for next week, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a tease. This one's for people who just need a break from modern living and long to shed their weary load. But if your nerves are raw and your brain is fried, hey, just grab a friend and take a ride together up on the open road. That wraps it up for this podcast. We hope to see you next time. A little bit of tease. Dave and I are going to be starting a second series here on the DuckTales TV show, which will be named. So we hope to see you there real soon. As always, be sure to give us a like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or 5-star review and review if you're watching this on iTunes, or if you're on Spotify, SoundCloud, or Google Play, which is becoming something else now. I don't know what it's becoming. Hey, just be sure. We hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll catch you all next time. Hi, folks. Clancy here. Just want to hop on real quick before you guys click off and just say a little message that I like ending these videos with every single time, and that's just a message on mental health, and that if you're out there struggling, which there's so many reasons why you would be right now, to not give up the fight, to push on for one more day, because I promise you, it may take a while, but it will eventually get better. I've been at the point where I've wanted to completely give up in my life, but I kept struggling and kept fighting. Even sometimes I didn't want to. I had to spend some time in the hospital just to get me in the right state of mind before I could even go to my own house and sleep without being a threat to myself. And my wish, if I could grant it to the entire world, is that nobody else has to suffer like that. It's not a fate
wish on my worst enemy. But if you are in the position where you struggle with this, just remember it's not your fault. Our brain chemicals do things that we can't control sometimes. But if you ever do need the help, the suicide prevention number is 1 800 273 8255. Again, it's 1 800 273 8255. You're not alone in this battle. 1 in 4 adults suffer from mental health. It's time we end the stigma and raise awareness.